Good day again to all of our participants and welcome back again to Africa Week. Welcome to our panel on computing and its potential role in driving Africa's economic future. As I mentioned earlier today, I'm a professor of computer science at the University of Michigan. And over the past decades, I had many opportunities to pursue research collaboration with colleagues at University of Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, where I spent my last and only sabbatical in 2012. I also have the honor to serve as a Vice Provost for Engaged Learning, where I work to promote and support collaborations between the University of Michigan and our partners across the globe. I would like to start to briefly introduce our esteemed panelists before we dive into the discussion. I will be brief before I wish to give them time to tell us about some of their excellent and unique endeavors in promoting computing across Africa. We have with us 4 panelists today, all engaged faculty members in top academic institutions in the US and in Africa, who have launched important initiatives in technology education. So here we have Dr. Jelani Nelson, who is a professor of computer science at UC Berkeley, is founder of Addis Coder, a computer science summer program for Ethiopian high school students in Addis Ababa and other Ethiopian cities. The very first time I met Professor Nelson was during the summer of 2018 in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. We were introduced by Dr. Senat Fizeha, whom UN President Schlissel mentioned yesterday morning. Dr. Fizeha is a cornerstone and enabler of U of M engagements in Ethiopia among many disciplines, and their work has a long-lasting impact and enabled many connections. Second, we have Dr. Filsum Andarji. He's an assistant professor of electrical and computer engineering in Addis Ababa University, and also an adjunct research scientist at the University of Michigan. Professor Andarji is a U of M African Presidential Scholar, UMAPS in short, alumnus, and is a co-founder of the African Undergraduate Research Adventure, that's called AURA, a program connecting Addis Ababa University students with the University of Michigan research efforts. Then we have Dr. Radiet Abebe, who's assistant professor of computer science at UC Berkeley and the junior fellow at the Harvard Society of Fellows. Professor Abebe is a co-founder of Black in AI, a network of over 1,500 researchers working in the artificial intelligence domain. And finally, Dr. Demba Ba, who's associate professor of electrical engineering and bioengineering at Harvard University and the Sloan Foundation Fellow. Professor Ba is the creator of CloudJ Hub, an accessible and extremely low-cost Amazon Cloud sandbox environment for data science, computation, and learning. Yesterday morning, Dr. Olukutun, speaking at the FinTech panel, remarked that there are lots of talented young people in Africa, with over 700,000 developers across different countries. And he said that what we need to do is to figure out how to harness all that talent to come up with African solutions to Africa's unique opportunity, a huge space for the next generation of computer scientists to be innovative and productive. So let's get started with our panel. To start, I would like to ask each panelist to tell us a little bit about their experience and endeavors in connecting with Africa and how they become engaged in promoting computing in Africa. So I'm gonna pass the mic to Professor Nelson first.
Hey, hello, everyone. So I have a couple intro slides to go with that question. Let me project. So as mentioned, I started a program called Addis Coder in Ethiopia. I started in 2011, the summer after I finished graduate school. It's a 4-week summer program, 5 days a week for high school students. It covers, well, really my intention was to cover algorithms, but the vast majority of students who participate don't know even basic programming yet. So I spend some time teaching that, and then I get into algorithms. And the very first time I taught it, 82 students completed the course. And the vast majority of the students, they stay in Ethiopia and go to and study computer science or a related field. We also have some number who decide that they want to study abroad, in the US or South Korea or Germany. And the ones I've highlighted in red are from the very first batch of the program in 2011. who are now doing their PhDs. So we've had 6 of our alumni go into PhD programs. The first one was in 2011, then I paused for a bit, and then now it's basically annual, except 2020, sorry, it's early enough here in California that my nanny hasn't started yet, so there's a baby next to me. But summer 2020 was canceled because of COVID. A little bit of stats, we've always had more than 40% girls participating in our program. The first iteration was, in 2016, was 45%. Classes 8 to 9 hours a day, and we get students from all over Ethiopia. We cover, the topics covered here, a lot of algorithm stuff, but also some basic Python. And the last 2 times we ran the program, we had about 175 students each. And I think one of the concrete outcomes of the program is that a lot of kids who didn't know anything about CS are now exposed and want to major in CS in college. So this is the last slide I'm going to show you. We had a survey in 2019 of our students. And prior to Addis Coder, only 27 of the participants said they wanted to major in computer science or a related field. After the program ended, that number turned from 27 to 83, so more than tripled. So I like to think that we help them appreciate what computer science is about.
Thank you, Jelani, and say hello to the kid. So next up is Professor Adarji.
Thank you, Professor Vertaco, for your kind introduction. Okay, I'd like to talk about the African Undergraduate Research Adventure Program that was started in collaboration with the University of Michigan and AIT, and this was an initiative of Professor Vertaco and Professor Todd Austin. So this program is a research exchange program for our undergraduate students that are completing their 4th-year undergrad students and going into internships to allow them to travel to the University of Michigan and engage with University of Michigan College of Engineering faculty in doing research. And the program ran for 12 weeks during the summer. And the students had like the opportunity to do actual research and engage with a culture that is different from theirs. And finally, they're able to successfully present their work through like final presentations. Like when the program started, there were about 140 applicants in the first year, and there were only 10 places. In the second year of this program, we had about 130 people applying and 16 students taking. So in total, 26 students participated in this program. However, last year, the program could not be done in person because of the pandemic. And that meant like the mentors and students had to adapt to like this environment, and the mentors had to change their projects to fit like to do remotely. And I would like to say that this program has actually helped these students to become confident in themselves in doing research, and not only that, but also like the projects that they chose to work on for their final year basic thesis. Like it was an extension of usually like for most of them, it's an extension of what they did during the oral program, which is like helpful because I'm sure that most of these students want to pursue like their graduate studies, which is highly needed in our country. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Fitsum. Next up is Professor Abebe.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation to this panel and for all the work that you do to bring us all together. I appreciate it. So I'm Radhika Abebe. I just started at UC Berkeley as an assistant professor of computer science. And I want to first start by saying how rare that is. So every year, the Computing Research Association, or CRA in the US, puts out a survey to a lot of the PhD granting institutions in computer science, computer engineering, and information science. And each year, the numbers are roughly the same. So I'll tell you the numbers from last year, but it's been roughly the same over the past 5 years that I've been paying attention. So two statistics that I'll share with you is that if you look at people who graduated with PhDs in computer science in North America, which is what the CRA focuses on, you find that out of the over 1,500 people graduating with computer science, computer engineering, and information science PhDs, only about 20 of them tend to be Black out of over 1,500 people. And of those 20, it's usually about 5 or 4 Black women. And that number, that statistic kind of gets worse as you go up the academic pipeline. So by the time you get to people who are tenure track or tenured professors in computer science, computer engineering, or information science, the total population is now about over 5,000. There's over 5,000 faculty on the tenure track or tenured in these fields. But we learned that out of over the 5,000, we only have about 85 last year who are Black faculty. And this statistic was something that I learned when I was in the middle of graduate school, and it was really a statistic that I found very disheartening, because I could see that as you go down the pipeline, it keeps getting worse and worse and worse, and people who are from marginalized communities, including Black and African researchers, tend to be more and more isolated. And so to mitigate that, we started Black in AI, which is the initiative that Valeria mentioned. It's a network of, now we are about 3,000 people, Black individuals who are working in the field of AI, some researchers, some practitioners, policymakers, and so on. But we do have a large contingent of people focused on this academic pipeline, a lot of people focused on research scientists and researcher positions, including as professor of teaching or of research within the community. And so we have various programs within Black in AI, but the main one that is relevant to our discussion today is our academic program, which is focused on supporting people going through the academic pipeline, people in undergraduate programs who want to do research. So we have various programming for that. People who want to apply to graduate programs. We have programming to understand, to surface the challenges that they're facing as they apply to graduate programs, and also to try to mitigate them. We actually have some research on this even that's coming out in a couple of months. And we also are starting to support people who are currently in graduate school to kind of minimize the sense of isolation that a lot of Black individuals feel in graduate programs, especially for African individuals who might have to leave home to do undergrad or graduate school, as I had. It could be an especially isolating experience. And we're also starting to expand to think about how we can also help diversify the faculty pipeline. And so I'll stop there, but I'd be very happy to discuss with you all any questions that you might have, and I'll drop a link to the program so you can take a look at the details.
Thank you very much, Radiat. We'll have questions. So next up is Professor Ba.
Thank you, Professor Bertocco, for the kind introduction. So I have been at Harvard for 5 years now, and I've developed 2 courses that leverage Jupyter Notebooks. So Jupyter Notebooks are a platform for analyzing and processing data using a web browser. The idea behind these courses was to leverage the notebooks to bridge what I thought was a gap between data collection, I come from an electrical engineering background, IoT, and computer science, data processing, and management in education. So I termed this concept labs in the wild, and the backbone really of these courses that I've developed was this Jupyter Notebook platform. And the main idea behind this is, how do we democratize, in a sense, access to data processing and data analysis tools and combine them with tools that enable students, for example, to use cheap devices to acquire data and have a ready platform to analyze these data. So the name of this platform is Cloud JHub. And what it does is that it automatically launches these Jupyter Notebooks that students can directly access through a web browser without any need for local installation of packages, management of dependencies, and so on and so forth. So what this does, in my opinion, is that it enables students to focus on acquiring data using IoT-like devices and simply analyzing them. And having acquired the data, all what they need to do is to log in to a browser, and assuming they have internet access, they then have access to this platform, Cloud JHub, powered by Jupyter Notebooks, which, based on the numbers that we've done, costs about $2 a month for 30 hours of usage in any given month per student, which is relatively cheap. So that's less than the cost of a latte at Starbucks. So I can delve more into this in the Q&A session of the panel. So my vision for Cloud JHub really has to do with work that I've started doing recently with some entrepreneur in the startup scene in Senegal, where I grew up, where they have approached me, people that I've gone to high school with some visions as to how one could use data science and the platform that we've developed to connect people that are part of the informal economy in Senegal and in West African countries at large to the internet and to the tech scene. This is something I can delve more into the Q&A session for this. Thank you for the invitation, Professor Bertacco.
Thank you so much, Demba. So the premise of this panel is that among technology, among STEM disciplines, computing occupies a unique place among all other technology fields, and it doesn't require expensive requirement for lab spaces, lab machinery, clean rooms, and so on. The only real equipment required for computing are the people, the computers, and reliable power and internet. And hold on your thoughts on reliable power and internet. I know it's not an easy one. We'll get to that later. But let's think for a second about opportunities. One comment that emerged yesterday by Dr. Songwe is that in Africa, 20 to 40% of the population is under age 20, which means there is a huge fraction of the population that is being educated right now, and there is an opportunity to provide education venues that will create careers, innovation for the continent, jobs, and so on. So my first question to you all is, what do you think are the key opportunities that computing provides in the context of Africa and African citizens? Specifically within computing, which is a very large space, what do you think are the disciplinary sector that would be a best fit for the needs of the continent, or even for the background preparation of the students? And then in terms of how do people deploy this, what are the most accessible venues? For instance, joining large international companies. And I have to say, with COVID, it's much easier to join companies, even if they're not in the continent, or maybe higher education pursuit or startups and so on. So with that question, maybe we can start with Fitsum to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Valeria. So, of course, like computing is easier to get like a business out of it, because like you said, like what someone needs is like a laptop and a connectivity, and they can start their business. And now that like you said, the generation is young, this is actually happening. And I have also noticed that like in high schools, especially in private high schools, like students are like being taught programming, and so it's like their laptops are no more used for browsing. They can actually make applications on them. So I think like the stage is set for like for people to have the confidence and actually like, you know, think that they can make a difference like in the international like computing, should I say, for a lack of a better word, computing business.
Yeah. Jelani?
Yeah, so I mean, first let me preface by saying, you know, I know almost nothing about economics. I'm a theoretical computer scientist. So in terms of, you know, what real world, you know, disciplinary impact should we be looking for to have economic impact? I can't speak with confidence. I mean, what I can tell you though is going back to the statistic you mentioned about the number of young people. I mean, from what I've seen, you know, the number of there are a lot of hungry young people who are very eager, in my experience, to be exposed to computer science, to subfields like machine learning. And with our program now, the number of people who applied, I can see it just from what I see in Oddiscoder. Like the number of kids who are applying every year to participate is giant, is huge. And they're constantly contacting the teaching staff afterward, looking for more opportunities, etc. So I definitely agree there that there's a huge desire amongst the young population.
One of the comments that came up yesterday and today was whether data science would be a discipline to really focus on, or a subfield to really focus on and push. And the other question is whether quantum computing is also a key opportunity for the continent. Now, I know at least two of you are committed their life to data science, so I'm not going to even ask that question, but maybe I can ask about the quantum computing aspect. So, Demba, do you have comments?
With regards to quantum computing in particular?
In general, like opportunities that you see. And yeah, tell me what you think about quantum computing as an opportunity for Africa.
So let me start with the data science aspect of this. I think as both Fitzum and Jelani have mentioned, right? So there's a lot of hungry young people. And what I've found in my experience, and I don't think this is simply restricted to Africa, right? Is that if we talk about data science, for example, right? I think the biggest issue is that there's a barrier to entry to even get to a point where you can start coding and actually playing with data, right? So not to promote Cloud JHub, but in my opinion, it would be awesome. And I'm not a policy person. I don't know how you implement this at scale, but it would be awesome if we could set up an infrastructure that is such that kids can just come sit down, not have to focus on setting up an environment, worrying about dependencies and so on and so forth, but they're given access to things such as devices to collect data. So IoT, you have an IoT background, Valeria, right? And all what they have to focus on is to learn the tools to process these data using some environment that has been put together for them. Now, how do you make this happen at scale? I don't know. I could very well see this part of something that governments invest in almost as a service that is offered in high schools, in universities. But I strongly believe that so facility with data literally is going to become the new form of literacy. And what I would love to see happen is for us to prepare African kids for something that actually has already started in a lot of places in the world. As far as quantum computing is concerned, let me pass that question to the next person.
That you're muted, and thank you.
That's unfair. I pass it back to you. You got to talk about quantum computing. I feel a bit duped here. So I really appreciate all the answers that people have given so far. I completely agree. In the interest of providing a complementary perspective, maybe I'll focus on the social aspects of what you asked about these barriers to entry. So of course I'm biased, right? The continent is my home. That's where I grew up. That's where well, maybe now I've learned more things since I left than when I was there, but a lot of the important things that I carry with me are things that I learned when I grew up in Ethiopia, right? So I'm clearly biased here, but one thing I want to say is a lot of times when we talk about data science in Africa, we very quickly get to all the limitations. That just becomes the whole point of the conversation. How can we teach people? How can we educate people? How can we do this? And how can we do that? I think it's important to also recognize just the extreme talent and innovation and creativity that's in the continent. I mean, I still talk to many students in Ethiopia who are just starting out, right? Just starting college, just left college and all that. And the things that they make, the things that they create, and with, fewer things than I may have access to are just so incredible. I know someone who literally goes to Mercato, which, if you've been to Ethiopia, you know what I'm talking about. He goes to Mercato, he just buys just totally random things, right? You know how Mercato is. And he builds these robots and he, sends me pictures of these robots that he's built. And how amazing is that? I don't know how to build robots. I'm sure if I just spent a lot of time on it, I could figure it out, but I don't, right? And so I think one thing I would really emphasize here is supporting African data science, supporting African computing, supporting African whatever it is, could look very, very different than what it looks like to support data science, say in the US, where I'm currently based, or I guess where many of us are currently based, right? And so I really do think we should figure out a system whereby those whom we are, the community that we're trying to support is actually the one that's driving the programs that we're putting together, the resources that we're trying to provide. And I say this because it's very easy to get this very, very wrong. So one example that I'll give is in AI and machine learning, there's now this massive excitement around machine learning for development, which is great. And there's a lot of sort of non-African researchers, people who've spent little to no time in the continent driving the research vision, actually, which is, a question mark. That's a little bit concerning. Let's dig deeper. And so one research that we've done is to try to understand the data accessibility and sharing ecosystem in the continent, right? Because if you want to do machine learning, you need data. If you're trying to do machine learning for development, you need data from, the nations that you're trying to study. And so we wanted to understand, how do people get access to that kind of data, and how do the people in these communities actually feel about it? And it was a research project that very quickly, we started thinking it was probably a neutral topic. It was absolutely not a neutral topic. People feel very negatively about their data kind of being extracted by people from the outside, by organizations, by powerful entities, by powerful individuals just coming in and saying, give us your data, we'll try to predict poverty or whatever it is. And we'll write a paper, you may end up being middle author. More often than not, you're going to be in the acknowledgement, but you should feel good because, we just solved this problem for you. We come in, we solve this problem, we leave. We don't have an actual investment in what's going on, right? And so that's how people perceive what's going on. And I think that's actually a very fair assessment of what's going on. And so people practice all sorts of ways of resisting not sharing their data, and they do so sort of with their hands tied, right? It's not easy to tell someone, say, who's a Harvard researcher, as I am, to just say, no, actually, I don't want to give you this data, right? And so people practice all sorts of ways of resisting that. And so I mentioned a lot, but the thing that I would say here is the social aspects of what we're talking about shouldn't be ancillary. They're actually, they're the core of what's going on. If you're working with a different community, you got to engage with the terms of that community.
That's very true. And I have to say, in my experience working with undergraduate students in Ethiopia, they have an incredible amount of creativity and self-drive and self-motivation, exactly as you described. 1 year I was there right as people were presenting their undergraduate dissertations, and there were devices and robots flying everywhere. It was really quite an experience. So let me take like a large viewpoint from this. And I would like to ask you to envision how could computing look like in Africa 10, 15 years from now if we did everything right. And if you can discuss that a little bit, and then we can go down on how your program fits into that or could contribute to that. Would you like to start, Demba?
Sure. And I will keep this very brief. So for me, what I would love to see over the next 10, 15 years is and I'll tell a story that will exemplify this. So every year now with COVID, this doesn't happen anymore. I teach a neuroscience school with some colleagues in South Africa. And half of the students come from the African continent, many different places. And the other half comes from other places in the world. And one of the discussions that I've consistently have had with these students, right, is that they have difficulty simply accessing computing resources. So being able to access, so I'm in AI, so let's talk about deep learning, being able to access a machine with a GPU to run some experiments, right? So what I would love to see happen, and I think what would be awesome, is if one could very readily have access to these machines for cheap. And if that infrastructure could be set up. So in private conversations we've had, Valeria, one thing I mentioned is that over here in the US, I can very easily access a machine on Amazon, pay for it by the hour, and so on and so forth, do what I need to do, and then get out of the platform, right? I don't know about other places in Africa, but as far as I know, in places such as Senegal or Ghana, where some of the students that I talked to were from, this is not a capability that they have. So what I would love to see us do is to actually develop that infrastructure that would enable that.
So actually, one of the questions was about the aspect that there are some key worldwide companies who will be willing to provide cloud access for this type of applications. And they perceive the internet connectivity being the limiting factor. What you mentioned is even before that, right? It's just the ability to create an account and access the system. Do you see solutions? Do you know about policies that are coming into place to help in that direction?
So, I mean, in my opinion, what I've seen in the case of Senegal in particular is that the entities that have been able to push towards the setting up of such an infrastructure have been startup and entrepreneurs.
Got it.
And entrepreneurs in particular that have been developing solutions that the government all of a sudden gets excited about. I mean, whether we like it or not, in a lot of our countries, in Senegal in particular, it takes that kind of backup to make things like this happen. So I think I could very easily see how the entrepreneurial world, by pushing for solutions that have an impact that then authorities get interested in, it can push towards the development of better internet connectivity and so on and so forth, that could then make the access to these computing resources easier.
So there is a need of government level partnerships between companies and governments to be able to deploy this.
From entrepreneurs I've spoken to in Senegal, this is the impression that I've gotten, yes.
Okay. So Rediat, let's pop up to the bigger question. How could computing look like in Africa 10, 15 years from now?
That's a wonderful question. I had thought about this when you mentioned it previously too. It's very clear. It's not very easy to me to kind of map out exactly what it should look like, right? I think that we're sort of in a moment of change and it could go in any number of directions. But some elements of it that I would love to see are, one, that computing in Africa is solving African problems, and those look different from other parts of the world. And even within the continent, they look very different depending on which sub-communities you're talking about and looking at. And so I would really love to see computing in Africa looking African and therefore looking very different from, say, the questions that I see here in the US. I would love to see that. The second thing I would love is, in some ways, there has been a sort of lag in terms of the tools that we use here in the US versus, how quickly they might be getting adopted in the continent, right? And vice versa, I should say. But in terms of the US or Western to Africa direction, in terms of the tools that we're using here that have not been quite as prevalent across the continent, there have been a lot of mistakes that we've made, right? So issues of algorithmic fairness and bias come to mind immediately. There have been a lot of tools that we've built that have ended up destroying people's lives in the US, say application of these tools in criminal justice systems. And it's really, we're in a very tough position, right? We're trying to mitigate the inequities and injustices that these tools are exacerbating, at the same time, trying to advance computing in the US. I would love to see Africa just avoid that altogether. I would love for especially sort of AI-driven systems within the continent to, from the beginning, be very aware of these issues of fairness and injustice and inequity, and to sidestep that as much as possible. So those are the two things, nothing concrete, but I think those are the two big things that I would hope
And
to
there
see.
is an opportunity there, right? Because we can learn from the lesson learned in the US context. So, being the second generation, we can start already on a better footing. Fitsum, 10, 15 years from now, everything went right.
Okay. So I would tell you from my experience, like what I have seen with the kind of students we used to get like 5 years ago and the kind of students we have now, and the kind of research they want to do. And it's almost difficult not to make them, it's almost difficult for us to find a student that is not interested to do their master's thesis or PhD in artificial intelligence, AI. We had to, force them, do some other thing because we also need other aspects of computing as well. So where I think this is going to go is like in 10, 15 years, I assume would be sufficient in supporting computing infrastructure for ourselves, both in software, in hardware, and the needed human power, that human capacity that we will need, and it's because of the trend that I'm seeing in not only the students becoming capable, but also their confidence in the subjects as well. So for example, Jamba was talking about resources. You guys were talking about quantum computing and how we don't have the resource, but students want to do projects in that. I have a student who's working on a project using quantum computing, and they are there, undergrad students asking me which field should I join so that I could do I could become a master in quantum computing, and I mean, we're going to be self-sufficient. That's what I see in 15 years, have the expertise in every field that we are in computing, so that we don't have to hire people anymore from our side.
So first of all, thank you for answering my quantum computing question that everybody was bouncing. But also, basically you're saying that the change is already happening. You already saw a big change in the last 5 years. And so as long as we keep the trajectory, there is a lot of promise. Things are really looking up.
Yes.
So what does Jelani think?
Sure. So what would I like to see as success in 20 years down the road? I guess a few things. One is I can only speak about Ethiopia because that's the only place I'm more familiar with in Africa. So I would like to see more awareness amongst the youth about computer science. For one, right now it's not even part of the standard curriculum. Computer science is not part of the standard curriculum for high school. And if I pick a random student from a random high school student in Ethiopia, well, a random person in the population is probably from a more rural region. And if I ask them, what do you want to major in? Let's say they're smart. What do you want to major in college? Sorry, it's I'm likely to get back the answer medicine, I think. Maybe they'll say engineering, but I think it's less likely that I'll hear computer science. And it's not because they're not interested. I think that they don't even know that they should be interested. They don't know what opportunities are available. So I'd like to see more awareness. That's number one. I would like to see more, I guess, improvement of bureaucratic processes that make it easier for people with ideas to be entrepreneurial. That's something that I don't know about as much myself. I'm very much an academic. I haven't done that much in entrepreneurship, but my understanding is that, and I remember we talked about this in the past, not today, that it's not easy to start a business I know in Ethiopia, but in some other countries, there are all these kind of unnecessary barriers. Another thing I'd like to see is, again, maybe more stability of government and stability of just geopolitical stability. I mean, I think people talk a lot about investing in Africa. What can we do to get more VC money, etc. And I think the very first step is stability, right? If I'm going to invest my money, I want to make sure that that all processes are stable and nothing is going to disrupt my investment, right? So
I think everybody has a will for stability. Just sometimes it's hard to achieve, right? But the goal is there for everyone.
Oh, and actually, one more thing that I'll say, I see it's related to a question sort of indirectly that I see was asked by Todd Austin in the Q&A, which is, is there any fear of brain drain, or should I wait to
I want, 'cause
No,
I want
you
to
can, you
connect.
can
Okay.
talk about it.
Okay. Is there any fear of brain drain? Like, these programs, let's say Addis Coder alumni, many of them are coming and doing PhDs in the United States. Is that a problem because that talent is now leaving Ethiopia? And I mean, what I can say is, I mean, look at maybe the biggest foreign sources of PhD students in the US. I would say maybe India and China in STEM
Mhm.
fields,
Yep.
right? And I don't think, and those countries seem to be doing quite well. And I think the point is, even if the people come here for their studies and maybe they stay here for a few years afterward, if the environment is right back home, then they will want to go home. I mean, that's their home, right? A lot of people prefer to actually be at their home where their relatives are and where they have friends, etc. And if I talk to my mother, who's Ethiopian, back when she came to the United States, which was actually before Derg, it was during the Emperor Haile Selassie's regime. According to what she tells me, is the vast majority of Ethiopians who came to the U.S. actually had no intention of staying here. Okay, so you look at what is happening now. First of all, there are PhDs who come here. They come here for their PhDs who go back, right? For example, Solomon Asafa is a friend of mine. He came here for undergrad at MIT, did his PhD at MIT, spent some time at IBM in New York, and then he went on to found IBM Research Africa. And now he's based in South Africa, but he's also running the research lab there as well as Kenya, right? So I mean,
Well, just an hour ago, we were talking to President Patrick Awa, who came to the US, worked at Microsoft, and then went back and founded one of the top universities in the continent, or most promising university in the continent. So yeah, I've seen that.
So just the final sentence to connect it is just, I would like to see more Africans getting PhDs in computer science. And maybe that means going abroad to get them in the beginning to bootstrap it. But I don't necessarily see it as a negative. And I think if you look at China and India, like in my field, Professor Andrew Yao, he was a professor at Stanford and Princeton. And then China recruited him to found an institute, the Institute for Theoretical Computer Science in Beijing at Tsinghua. And that's been very successful at producing, top students. So I'm not so pessimistic.
Awesome.
Can I jump in on that a little bit?
Definitely. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a really wonderful question, and honestly, the elephant in the room. So I appreciate the person who asked that. There are a couple of things that I would add. So this is obviously something that I've had to think about, because I think it's a deeply ethical question, and one that, I was like, maybe I'm contributing to some trend that's not a positive trend, right? I left when I was starting college in the US, and I haven't, I've stayed in the US, right? I'm going to be here for kind of the foreseeable future. And so I had thought very carefully about it. Two things I would mention here are, one is that I think that being places is not so binary anymore. Well, I guess right now it is binary just because we're all stuck in our apartments and waiting for this to end, right? But now it's not so much. There are a lot of people who split their time between different institutions, especially with everything being virtual. It really is possible to kind of have your foot into different places. This is very common. It's not just, those of us who've left home.
Radiat, I think it's less binary now than it's ever been. Like, you are on the East Coast.
True. Yeah, in that sense, I guess no one is anywhere. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great point, right? And even, once this nightmare is over, we're still going to have the ability to just split your time if that's what you want to do. And I do want to echo that, yes, we can probably point out a bunch of like one-off examples of people who studied somewhere and then went back or whatever. We can find examples for any combination of things that you want. But what's worth looking at here is, what is the sort of the general sentiment and the pattern, right? Even though I'm in the US, my heart is still where I grew up, and my heart is in the continent. And so this is not something that I'm letting go, and I'm by no means an exception. And I think that a lot of people feel that that pull to contribute meaningfully to their home, whatever that looks like for them. So that's the other thing I'd mention. And the third thing is, there's something about the word brain drain that kind of feels a little bit uncomfortable to me. So I want to point it out. I think it has this sort of implicit assumption that there are some people that are extremely, extremely talented, and there's some system that is like sucking them out of, one place, let's say their country, and then to another place, let's say the US. But what about everyone else who hasn't left? Are we assuming that, you know, they are sort of less capable, that they have less to contribute? I think that's a very unhelpful way to think about it, right? And so again, that brings me back to the original point, which is, well, what are we investing in the country, in the countries that we're looking at, in the continent that we're looking at? And so I think we should really think about that, because I think every time this conversation about brain drain comes up, it very quickly goes to, well, you know, you're a super exceptional person and look, you're not home anymore. And I think that, you know, there are a lot of incredibly exceptional people. We just haven't actually given them a chance to sort of fully realize that.
I completely agree with you, you know, and even when you think with the professor hat, you think about like, how can you predict the path of an individual? Everybody has unique path in lives. They may be working in different places, different time. And just because they take one step, you cannot then project everything else they will do. Indeed, there are many ways to contribute to the country and to the country education or talent development. Thanks for bringing that up. So let's go back to our, you know, how would computing look like 10, 15 years from now? And how does your initiative fit into that? And you know, actually, by the way, there are some questions that are coming up. There are people who would like to know how to apply for your initiative, how to join, how to get access to it. And so I don't know if you can chat the link or if you want to address it in your answers. And then there are also questions saying, you know, we're talking about pursuing activities that bring in young African talent, but then are we actually creating a divide between rural and city people? And how do you or close that divide or contribute to close the divide or foresee closing that divide? Who would like to start? Rediet, maybe? Or Jelani?
I think I answered it, so let me skip this one.
Okay.
I roughly answered it, yeah.
Yeah, Jelani.
Sorry, can you briefly say that again?
Yes, how does your program, Addis Coder, contribute to try to reach that future 10, 15 years from now that we just discussed? And specifically in your program, actually, I think you have a great comment that you could provide there. How do you close the gap between city and rural environments where access to resources is much more limited?
Right. So first of all, the vast majority of our students these days are from rural areas. You know, the program happens in Addis Ababa, which is the capital city, but less than 10% of the participating high school students are actually from Addis Ababa. So we accomplished that in a number of ways. The main way is, and I can't take credit for this, you know, we co-organize our program with the Mala Zenawi Foundation. And, you know, when I first started the program, I was just doing it by myself. I put ads on the website. I had people go into schools and post flyers. I had radio stations advertise. All the students I got were from Addis Ababa, and the majority were from private schools, even though it was a free program. And, you know, I found that problematic, that somehow only kind of the richer than average kids were taking advantage of this free resource. So I decided to partner with the government, and I didn't really know how to navigate the government bureaucracy myself. So I partnered with an Ethiopian organization, which is the Mala Zenawi Foundation, that had a lot of contacts with the government. And, you know, with them, now we work with the Ministry of Education. 75% of our students every summer are selected by the Ministry of Education. So they go to all the, you know, the regional offices and say, from your region, I would like you to pick, you know, the top students in your region and recommend them for this Addis Coder program. So we got a ton of rural students. We've had students, you know, who have never even typed on a keyboard before. And, you know, in the very first week, we do some extra lessons after class just to get them the basic, you know, keyboarding skills. Okay, so that's that about the rural urban. And one other thing I'll say about the rural urban divide as well. We also these days, first of all, we have a teaching staff that's quite large every summer, and half our teaching staff are TAs based in Ethiopia. And we intentionally recruit them from all over the country. So we don't want all our TAs to be from Addis Ababa University. Like we've had TAs from Gondar, from Jimma, from Adama, from Addis Ababa, from like LA, Adigrat, etc. Intentionally from all over. And the reason is we tell them when we recruit them, it's not a requirement, but we just kind of hint that it would be nice. Wouldn't it be great if after the summer was over, you went back to your home region and started your own kind of offshoot program
that could run, throughout the year as opposed to just the summer. And I think that it works. This planting of that idea in their head works. And we've had several offshoot programs run by former teaching staff of Addis Coder, as well as former students, alumni. And again, primarily outside of Addis Ababa, outside the capital city. Good. So, and the other question was like, how does this contribute to more awareness, or the vision that I hope to see in the future? It definitely increases awareness. So if you saw the, I'll say a couple things. One is when I gave my intro slides, I mentioned that the number of students who said they're interested in CS tripled, more than tripled, based on our surveys amongst our participants. And it's not just the exposure from teaching them CS. We also have things like a career day. We brought in over a dozen people, primarily, Ethiopians living in Ethiopia, so that they can see that this is not just, CS is not just important to create Facebooks, and Googles abroad, but there are people locally using computer science to launch companies and work for the government and et cetera. Okay. So, and we've had startup founders in Ethiopia, startup founders in Kenya come by. We've had researchers come by who are based, African researchers. So that increases awareness. That's one thing. There's one other thing I was going to say. Okay, I'm blanking right now, but I think we've succeeded at least in. Yes, another piece of evidence about increasing awareness, which is I was watching Ethiopian television, and they interviewed the number one. So Ethiopia is one country that has a national exam to get into university. Many countries have this, and on TV, they were interviewing the number one high school kid in Ethiopia. He was from Bahir Dar. Okay, he got number one in the country on the national exam. He had never done Addis Coder. Okay, but in his interview, he started talking about Addis Coder, and he started talking about me. And I was like, how does this kid even know what? So I think even though we're only training 175 students per summer, somehow the word has gone out. I think because some of our alumni have been interviewed on TV. The word has gone out, and like kind of a lot of kids now, even if they didn't participate in the program, are realizing, hey, there's this program, and hey, there's this thing called computer science, and they start Googling, and it kind of triggers them to self-study a little bit of computer science too. So it's kind of contagious in that way.
Thank you. Demba and Fitsum, do you want to go first? Oh, Fitsum maybe, he's not muted.
Yeah. So like for us, the rural city divide is handled by the government, because the government like chooses which student is to study where. So like they're like placed. So like we usually have like a proportionate number of students from like all over the country. And so that is the pool that applies to the Aura program. And like I would say that there is like a higher chance of like representation from all over. In fact, if you remember last year when we had to do the online version, we had an issue because most of the students were outside of Addis, and the internet was blocked outside of Addis, and they didn't have access. So like that shows you like the distribution of students that we have. Like another thing that I actually want to like ascertain why computer science and like anything tech has being the focus of like a new student desire to study is because the I would say the old, for example, for engineering, the old and like established engineering, like they don't have a market like for jobs. So the people know if they study like computer science, like software engineering and topic like that, fields like that, they would have like job opportunities. And that is also what is driving not only like the awareness, but like what is actually happening in the market. Like because people studying, like for example, software engineering, their employment rate is 100%. people studying electrical and computer engineering, their employment rate is almost like 100%. It's 90 something percent. But like if someone wants to study like civil engineering as they used to, like say like 5 years ago, they're not getting employed as much as they used to. And guess what? They're also studying like software engineering, and so that they're also like getting into that business as well. And another thing that I want to talk about, studies associated with like brain drain, is actually that. So when the ORAS like program started, there was reluctance from like authorities from like AIT, because they were thinking that these students would go and disappear. But what happened was that all the 10 people went and did their they did research, and they improved, and they came back. And now people are excited about whenever I say that this ORA program, like how many students, can we have more students? And like, so what is happening is that now we have more students. For last year, like we had about 16 students like do this, even if they didn't get the chance to travel, but they were able to do research here, like with like the resources they have got. And that kind of opportunity, I mean, how would you get it? Like, we're building our capacity here, but there is an already established capacity that we can utilize, right? So I mean, like, I have, like, it's a good thing. It may not like pay up right now, but like in 10, 20 years, it's going to pay up big, because like people are like, say, coming back, but when they come back with capital.
That's a
and that is
fantastic
going.
thought.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
And Demba, do you have comments about how CloudJ Hub can help reach our goals?
Yeah, before I get to that, actually, I want to follow up a bit on what Jelani said. I think one of the things that we underestimate, at least that I do or that I used to, is the power of example. So the power of you donating your time, Jelani, consistently on a yearly basis, and kids seeing your example and being like, wow, you know what, this is a possibility. I think we underestimate that. And this ties into your question, Valeria, because, okay, so how do I take somebody like CloudJ Hub and make it help the continent, which is something that I have not done yet, right? One of the things that I would love to do, right? I don't think, and perhaps the other panelists have a different opinion on this, I don't think there's going around me actually donating my time and going to Senegal or in any other country that would welcome me and spending some time to actually set up this infrastructure for them, right? And then empowering them to sustain it in the future. So that's one of the things that I would love to do, hopefully in a year or two when Professor Life gives me that opportunity. Now, in terms of the rural divide, again, so the only experience that I have about this is by going back to Senegal and talking to my friends who are in the entrepreneurial scenes. So I can't talk about this from an educational perspective, but from a problem-solving perspective, what I've seen them do a lot, and this came in a few of the comments that have been made earlier, is I don't think that we want to be thinking about using computer science to build the next Facebook or the next Google. I think Reggie and Jelani mentioned this earlier, right? So one way these friends of mine have been bridging this rural city divide is to actually go talk to people in the rural areas and figure out what kind of problems they have that we could use tech or data science or computer science to actually solve. So in other words, involving these rural communities in the process of coming up with ideas to solve local problems.
So I would like to address another couple of questions in the few minutes that we have left. The first one is, we outlined these goals, but we all know there are barriers, right? Barriers of access to education, access to electricity, access to internet. And I have to tell you, yesterday we had a discussion with Dr. Songwe, who expressed that the priorities of promoting STEM education have increased, especially in light of the pandemic, that she has set a priority to try to bring all the schools in Africa to have access to internet, because it's become much more necessary in light of the pandemic. I would like to hear from you, maybe briefly, what do you think can be done to remove these barriers that we all know about? I mean, beside maybe policies and talking to government, which of course can be done, and of course it has a role, but it's also a very challenging and hard to control type of contribution. If I don't know if any of you has ideas and suggestions, and then I wanted to ask you one more question before we close.
Can I answer that? Like, at least from my experience here. So what I have noticed that before the pandemic and after the pandemic is that an attitude change. When I say attitude change, is because before that the pandemic, like I think the people that are making the policy and the telecom company and the people using the infrastructure, like the clients, didn't think they needed the internet. So what happened was, like, when the pandemic hit and everybody had to work from home, and so like the telecom companies scrambled, people scrambled to get access to the internet, and actually, like, at least like a wired internet coming to their homes. And people also changed their attitudes in paying for that service. Because I remember, like, I've been trying to get my parents to get connected for like years, but they refused because they thought that the monthly payment they had to pay was too much. But now that's the only way they could get to us. So they got that service. So this is true for almost like a lot of households, like in Ethiopia now have a wired connectivity. So I would assume that this happened because of like the need, and that need actually changed the attitude of the people. And
they prioritize differently.
Yes. So like that would also means that this would also reflect into, like, you know, the policy making, like officials, right? They would say, okay, yes, it is important. We need to have the internet and we need to have access to everyone, right? So I think I'm hoping that this is the trend everywhere in Africa and probably in the world as well.
Thank you. Do we have other comments? I really wanted to ask you something. So, oh, I think Rediat want to say something. No?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. I'll mention maybe two things really quickly. It doesn't really completely answer your question because I think this question is sort of intractable, to be honest. So I definitely think we should recognize the sort of the legacy of colonialism and the impact that it's had on the continent. It really wasn't that long ago. We're still feeling the impact now. We really haven't had, we haven't totally confronted that. We haven't totally sort of tried to mitigate the harms that have been done as a result of, this legacy of colonialism, right? And so that's left many nations with fewer resources and impoverished, and it's just been very difficult to dig out of that. Okay, that's a reality. And so I don't think we're going to solve anything until that kind of more historical or I guess policy problem has been solved, right? So this is not a computing question. So that's something I want to say. I don't know what that would look like, but I do think it's important to point that out. The second thing, which is sort of maybe almost like the opposite of what I just said, is also that it's really great that when I'm on panels that involve the continent, we're thinking about the barriers that people on the continent have to face, lack of connectivity, all these things. That's real. We should definitely talk about it, right? The numbers are they speak for themselves in a sense, right? We have only at most a third of the population being connected in any kind of country in the continent. That is just a number, that is just a fact. But I also want to say that it's not a purely African problem. And I say this because, we're in the US where a lot of schools have gone virtual. And what we're learning is that a lot of Black and Hispanic and low income and other marginalized students are not actually able to learn at the same rate as everyone else. They don't have internet at home, or they have very slow internet at home, or there are all these issues that are happening. And so I just want to point that out because I think that if we really want to make progress in terms of computing for Africa, computing for good, whatever we want to call it, I think that we need to have a sort of balanced view, which means I think also not recognizing that some problems that we talk about as being African problems are actually just a problem everywhere. It's
Yeah.
just that some countries, I think, are just refusing to kind of confront that in the same way as we are. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Okay, so one of the topics I definitely wanted to touch upon is academic partnerships, right? What do you think academic institution like mine or yours could do in terms of developing partnership that would accelerate the pace at which we reach that vision that you had and described for 10, 15 years from now? So, get more people involved in computing, get more professions in that space, get Africans be more involved on the global scene in terms of ideas and research in computing. And I will start with Jelani, if he's
Yeah,
okay.
sure. One, okay, so I'll say things as they come to my mind. One is eliminate the GRE requirements. Okay.
COVID help with that one.
Yes. So, I think Rediet can probably say more about the study she's done, but just the number of people who, and it's not only African students, but people from, let's say, countries that are on average have, people are less rich than they are in the United States. The GRE is a very expensive exam. Okay. There are countries for which the GRE exam is a month or several months of salary for a family. Okay.
I need to add something here.
Oh, yeah.
I read several publications about the GRE, including by the company who runs GRE.
Okay.
And what is being established is that GRE is best at predicting the profession of your parents. Maybe it has a relation with the grades of the first semester. It has nothing to do with your graduate school success. So let's put that one to sleep. Next.
Another one I'd like to see is maybe have more. Universities love to have study abroad programs. This is more at the undergraduate level.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the stats are across all American universities, but like, let's say, for example, I know at MIT, where I attended as a college student, there aren't that many or kind of study abroad programs in Africa. And what I like to see is more study abroad programs in Africa that also are not like service-based. It's not like we're going there for charity. It's like we're going there to interact in a meaningful way with institutions there, with universities there, etc., with companies there. So I'd like to see more of that. Get people used to the idea of, get the students in your university used to the idea of interacting with African institutions.
Okay. And Demba, do you have thoughts about possibilities for academic partnership that could help?
I mean, so following up on Jelani's comment, I think, at least in my opinion, I think at least in the beginning, more so than efforts that are driven at the level of administration and universities. So it takes individuals. I mean, it takes, for example, what you started, Valeria, or it takes somebody like Jelani or myself or Rediet going there and starting something, achieving some success, and all of a sudden, and because whether we like it or not, institutions like to see some form of success before they commit to efforts like this, right? So I really think that it starts from grassroots type of efforts. But once it is established at the university level, I love what Jelani just said about just going there and listening and actually letting the local institutions basically drive the work of how things should happen over there, as opposed to coming from a perspective of assuming that all the solutions are at the disposal of the person who's coming to help, basically. So giving a hand up, basically, and not a handout. Yeah,
very good point. Do you have comments from Fitsum or Rediet?
Yeah, I mean, I am a product of that collaboration. So I would definitely say that academic collaborations actually, build local capacity, and at the same time they create opportunities for further engagement. For example, I remember when you guys first visited, like Demba said, like you guys came and visited us, right? That's where it all started, right? Like for the collaboration between AIT and College of Engineering at UM. And this is true with other universities as well that we have collaboration with. it's like you make the first connections, and then then that connection becomes institutionalized and expands into other fields as well.
Thank you. Okay. So before we close the panel, I would like to know if you have a key message you wish to leave our audience with. Who would like to start? Jelani? Demba, go ahead.
I can take this, and it's related to a question that's been asked in the Q&A. I was just taking a look, right? So because, and there's not enough time for me to expand on this, but I think there's an assumption that we don't have a history of computing in Africa, right? Which is faulty. And I could go into the details of this, right? And I think the key message that I want to leave, especially for Africans and African young people, right, is that if you look at our history, we have a tremendous history of computing. I mean, for example, so binary communications and digital is part of some African traditions in Mali and in other places. So I think what I would love to leave young people with is this idea that, hey, we have this in our history, and let's start figuring out ways we can start becoming part of this more recent revolution in computing, but within our own context, and that people like me, and I think everybody else on the panel here, we're willing to help.
Yeah, that's a fantastic idea, actually, a history of computing based in Africa. I'll think about that one. Really like it. Fitsum.
I would say this, I keep saying about confidence, right? And the reason I keep saying that is that like when like computers came, they took, like, for example, when computers came to Ethiopia, they like, I remember I was like in high school, and we were not even allowed to get into their in the room the computers were, right? So we grew up getting scared of computers, and like, because they were expensive and only like a few experts were allowed to work on them. And the same mentality like I've seen in many of like my students, like in the 10 years ago, but that is changing. And so like we need to work on I think like in the future we need to work on further to like expand on the confidence of the people that they could use this tool and improve themselves, and also like help with the economic growth of their countries.
Thank you. Jelani.
Yeah, so a message that I want to leave people with. I think I'll keep it short. Maybe if you're inspired to create your own kind of program, whether it be something like Aurora Audiscoder or something else that you want to do, there are a lot of there are ways to set up your program where the cost would be minimal, and I think there's nothing stopping you from doing it right now. So the first time I ever ran Audiscoder, the only financial expense was my plane ticket to go there. The kids got to the program with their own, via their own transportation, etc. So there's no real barrier to starting these kinds of things on your own, and I would encourage you to try if you're so inclined.
Thank you. And Radiat.
I appreciate everything that's been said by my fellow panelists, and I especially appreciate the history of computing. Demba, I think about that not just in computing but other contexts a lot. I think it's very easy to assume that Africa doesn't have this rich history and context that we can work off of. So I will say for those who are not African but want to support computing in Africa, or really anything in Africa, I would say probably whatever knee-jerk reaction, if you don't have context in the continent, if you haven't lived there, if you're not really embedded in the context, whatever ideas you have are probably going to be not 100% correct, right? They're probably going to be maybe 50% or something. And so I would really encourage you to work in collaboration with organizations and with individuals who are already doing that work, because chances are they probably need you to really support them, to support the work that they're doing. I can certainly say that for Black in AI, there's many different ways in which you can support. And so try to do that. You don't have to be the hero of that story. Just let people do their thing and kind of support. Okay, so that's what I would say. And in terms of those who are African, who are on the continent, especially people who are just starting out with their computing career or starting to think about it, the thing that I struggled with most, despite having all the privileges that I have, the thing I struggled with most was that I, in my sort of isolation and being the only Black person around, oftentimes, and certainly being the only African person around, I often doubted my perspective on things. I would always think, okay, I'm thinking about this differently. Seems like everyone else is not thinking about it this way. Probably the way I think about it is not quite mature, or it's not quite computing. Maybe I'm not supposed to be a computer scientist. There was a great deal of sort of self-doubt and kind of challenge that came with that. And I consider myself to be a reasonably, self-assured person. And it's very, very hard to not feel that way when you feel so different. And I would say how you think about things differently as a result of, the life that you've lived, the context that you have, is actually a superpower. It's going to make you a very unique researcher, a very unique practitioner of computing. And so, of course, do what you can to learn what you can about the environments that you're entering, but try to preserve what makes you special and what makes you different, and the unique perspectives that you're bringing to the table. Because by the time you get to sort of a more secure position, it really is going to be this like massive asset, and it's going to be the thing that will keep you going. So that's what I would add.
Thank you so much, Radiat. So we reached the end of our panel session today. So thank you very much to all of you for joining us. And I really would like to send a special thank you to Jelani, who dialed in at 6:30 in the morning, did not have babysitter coverage, and just plow through this. So thank you very much. I would like to thank our audience and especially the students that are with us today. And I would like to just put a plug. The next panel will feature a discussion on transportation and future opportunities in the African context, which is both opportunity to develop new technology, but also enable new connection, including in computing, to pursue joint venture across the continent. The moderator is Professor Jerry Lynch, who's department chair of the Department of Civil Environmental Engineering at the University of Michigan. And he will sit down with colleagues and entrepreneurs from the United States, Uganda, and South Africa. While we wait to start the panel, I will ask everyone to stay connected with us as we prepare the next session. Feel free to stretch your legs and be back here at 11 a.m. East Coast time or 6 p.m. Central African time. Thank you so much to everyone. It was great
Thank you,
to be with
Valeria.
you.
Thank you, everyone.